This is Brent.
And this is Amanda.
We are the Unreliable Narrators.
Here to talk about the strangeness, the mystery, and the wonder of Gene Wolfe's prose.
What is time?
What is memory?
What is a person?
Is this reality?
Where are we?
Do we exist?
Have you ever considered that all your choices are what brought you right here to this very moment?
Episode number 17. Continuing with Bibliomen, we have the story of Gertrude S. Spinning Jenny de Plata.
Yeah, so this one, I didn't enjoy this one as much.
I was going to start off with, I bounced off of this one.
Okay.
So I was hoping that you would be able to fill me in with why I was wrong for not enjoying this character as much as I expected to.
I have some thoughts about that, and I'll save them for the end, but just for a kind of an overview. So Spinning Jenny is about this woman who fills in for a DJ, and while she's recording the intros and outros, she doesn't understand what she's supposed to be doing, so she starts reading the album notes and the lyrics from the wrong album for the one that's being played. People find it comical. They record a punk album about her misunderstanding. The punk album comes back to the studio, and she has a nervous or mental breakdown when she starts reading her own words that are in a song that somebody else is singing. And then she goes to write a book about her experience after she can no longer speak.
I think that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously we have a couple of themes here, or actually, basically we have one recurring image as far as I can tell, and that's the circle. And so, I don't know, we can call out records or circles. She's spinning Jenny. The radio station that she's at is WHRL, which seems to be whirl. So whirl, spin. And then we have, of course, the recursive process of her reading her own words and then ending up with aphasia, unable to speak.
Yeah.
And then finally, when she's writing her book, she's said to be using the daisy wheel printer. So lots of circles.
Yeah, and the story circles too.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
So I think this is based off of this character was inspired by Gertrude Stein. And she was an American writer, and she composed poems, wrote novels, and plays.
What makes you think that she was the inspiration for Spinning Jenny, other than the Gertrude Stein?
The approach that Gertrude Stein was known for was kind of just throwing things in and see if they work. Throw stuff at the wall and see if it works.
Sort of a Jackson Pollock of words?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's kind of, other than that, I'm not sure. I'm actually not that familiar with Gertrude Stein. I think I read a short story of hers probably back in high school, maybe a play. Other than that, it's not somebody that I've gone back to.
Well, you're ahead of me because while I'm aware of the name, I know nothing about her, and I don't know that I've ever read one of her stories, not in high school, which I didn't go to, or in undergrad or graduate degree in English. So maybe I was just taking the wrong classes, or the right ones. If I don't like Spinning Jenny, I'm not sure I would like Gertrude Stein.
From what I gather, she seems to be either you like her or you don't.
Okay, so a polarizing figure.
Yeah. So Spinning Jenny, so you talked about the circular aspect of this. So a Spinning Jenny, it's actually a nickname for a multi-spindle spinning frame for making cloth. And it was invented in 1764 or 65, depending on what you read, in England.
I'm sure that year is very, very important.
Well, you never know with Wolfe. So.
Well, you sound like a certain relative who shall remain nameless trying to identify, was it on Wednesday or was it on Thursday? Well, I can't remember for something that has no relevance to the story. Anyway, 64 or 65.
Yeah. And so kind of folk legend says that it's named after his wife or daughter, where they tipped over the spinning frame and he realized it could continue to work. And so that's where he got his idea from. However, probably an urban legend because neither his wife nor any of his daughters had the name Jenny.
Also, it feels kind of like a masculinist revision of someone, a woman was working on her spinning and she made an adjustment and then he took credit for inventing it.
I hadn't thought about it from that.
Well, I was just thinking shades of Rosalind. Oh, I can't remember her last name. but the scientist that I'm just getting shades here of Rosalind Franklin, who was working on the molecular structure of DNA and whose lab partners took credit for her work.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about it from that angle. So.
I'm probably wildly overreading this, but we'll go ahead and mark it down in history as one of those moments. Anyway, so the invention of the spinning jenny in the 18th century.
Yeah.
See, I'm getting more and more vague as we go.
Well, just to add
back in the past.
Just to add another circular motion in here, jenny is actually slang for InGen, so it's in gen, so you get the jenny on the end. Another thing, so you already mentioned Whirl, WHRL. So that's an actual radio station.
Oh, that's an actual call sign for a radio station?
It is. It's not in Boston, though. It's in Emporia, Virginia. And I got really excited when I found that.
Okay.
Come to find out, though, it's actually newer. So it's a sister station for a Norfolk radio station. And it's only been broadcasting since 2012.
So definitely not an influence on Wolfe unless he traveled in the corridors of time.
Yeah. So, but then the obvious thing is Book of the Long Sun. There's a spaceship named the Whirl.
Wait, what?
I know.
I don't know what this is about. Are you referring to something outside the text?
I am.
Okay.
It's a generational ship they're inside of. Don't look at the cover or that'll spoil it for you.
Spoilers for a book that's been out for several decades.
Yeah. So it's in July of 1981 that she accepted a position as a typist. So then it's in December of 1981 that she was asked to fill in for an ailing newscaster. And so she read the wire copy and the bulletins for the U.S. Weather Bureau. And then in the text here, we get June 1982, so we jump ahead a year. She again became the station's temporary news reporter when the regular newsman was on vacation. The station manager, W.A. Simple, was later quoting saying there were no complaints.
My marginal note there is that that's just an extremely bland endorsement of someone.
Well, it is, but it's even funnier when we get to the end. So I wanted to point out 82 there because we get a jump of a year in this story, but then we come back. So then we jump back. So what are we, 3 paragraphs down, we jump back to August 1981.
Right, before the June 82 news reporter incident.
Yeah. One thing here, the W.A. Simple, I think that's how you're...
Yeah, I would think so. Semple,
Yeah.
Simple.
So I was looking up the etymology of that name. It's actually a Scottish nickname that became a surname. And it means either simple or straightforward or humble. And that'll maybe make a little more sense
as we go forward.
Yeah.
So the middle part of the story is the part where it starts to get ridiculous, right? So she has to fill in for a disc jockey with a sprained back.
Mm-hmm. So one thing that may not be super obvious to people that have grown up in a digital age is that, so disc jockeys, abbreviated DJ, and they used to actually have multiple turntables, or later there were large cassette decks. And so as a disc jockey, you were moving all of those around and queuing up songs. And so you would place the needle where it was supposed to be. So when you dropped the needle down, it would start playing, or get the cassette to where it needed to be. So it used to be a very active job.
Right, far more so than the button pushing and or mouse clicking that is probably what's required today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I know somebody who, when they job shadowed, they decided to job shadow one of the local DJs here in the area. And what it amounted to is that even though they were at the work site, on location.
Right, at the station.
At the station, everything was already queued up to play. They had everything recorded. And mostly they were there to make sure that the MP3 files played.
Oh my goodness, that sounds so boring.
Yeah, so it's not as active as it used to be. So having a sprained back, a back injury, would definitely keep somebody.
Yeah, the getting up and down and moving around would have been a little bit difficult. So that's what gets our spinning Ginny in her role as the DJ.
And she's instructed to speak in between the songs. And so that the step-ons,
Which is for young people who are accustomed to Spotify or whatever service they use, Pandora or whatever, that it's just an endless list of songs that plays forever and ever and ever. And if you cough up $5 or $12 or whatever it is a month, you don't even have to hear an advertisement. Back in the day, and some podcasters may have been alive in the 80s when the story took place, they did speak over the beginning and the ending of songs, and this is called out in the story to prevent people from recording from the radio onto a cassette tape and making their own mixtapes. Not that that prevented us from doing it.
Yep.
But that step-on meant that you couldn't get the whole intro and the whole outro of every song.
Yeah, no, large sections of my childhood with friends was because we had a 2-cassette boombox.
Ooh, you were living large.
Yeah. Well, actually, my friend had it, but...
Yes, your friend was living large.
Yeah, so it was about recording. He was super obsessed with getting clean recordings of it, so sometimes they wouldn't step on at the beginning. So he'd have the beginning, and then he'd splice it with a step on.
Oh my goodness, that's so much work.
It was, but that was when you didn't have any money.
Well, yeah. I mean, that would be a way to do it.
So the DJ's medicated, and he gives her instructions to do the step-on, but he doesn't explain to her that you're only supposed to do it at the beginning and at the end of the song. And then he tells her, well, if you can't think of anything to say, the album notes, that's going to be useful. Because he's medicated and because she didn't understand what she was supposed to be doing, she's talking throughout the whole song.
Yes, and she's not necessarily using the album notes from the album that's playing.
Yeah. Another thing in here, I thought that this was a dead end at first, but when I started researching it, I think Wolfe had intended this in here. So we flip back and forth between DJ. We get DJ with capital letters as an abbreviation. But then we get DJ, D-E-E-J-A-Y.
Right, and I've seen it both ways in other contexts, but he's flipping back and forth between the two here.
Yeah, on the same page. And so the way it's used there, a DJ is a reggae term where a performer will sing, speak, and improv their own lyrics over either instrumental versions of popular music or even add in their own words in popular songs where there's just instrumental parts.
Wait, and so is this an actual distinction that I have until this moment been unaware of, that disc jockey as in the radio guy and DJ as in the cool guy that works at the coffee shop but also has a part-time job DJing parties are two distinct roles and not two contexts for the same thing?
It used to be, yes, but now they're largely used interchangeably.
Okay, that's super interesting.
It is. And so part of it is because, so it was very much a live performance.
Right.
And there's an aspect of it where you're using the voice as an instrument. And so you're trying to make a rhyme or hit a beat. So there's going to be, they put in words that are not words, but sounds that aren't words, but they rhyme.
Right. So creating that extemporaneous music.
Yeah. It used to be much more popular and distinct as a genre. And if we have any listeners that have ever gone out and collected old records, and then when they flipped it over to the B-side, then there was, I'm using air quotes here, but weird versions of the song that was on the A-side. And you're kind of I don't know what this is, that you probably ran across a reggae DJ accompaniment. Because it used to be something that was much more popular.
That is interesting. I thought you were, when you said if any of our listeners have done this, I thought you were going to say if any of our listeners have been cool enough to be invited to parties where there might be DJs, they might have experience of these things. But as far as I know, neither of us have been cool enough to be invited to the good parties.
No, not I. So as far as a contemporary analog, there is an artist, Shaggy. So he has a song, Angel. And that one has been, so it's reggae, but it's also been influenced by the DJ tradition. So, but it's not the same thing. It's we're downstream, and he's incorporated aspects of this culture into his contemporary music. So,
I think I have some research to do, although I'm very uncertain about looking up Shaggy.
I almost guarantee you've heard him because
Oh,
he's
okay.
Yeah,
Just am unaware.
yeah. So he's on popular radio stations. So he's kind of
Yeah, which I listen to all the time.
Well,
No, I've probably heard these things. I
I've
just
heard him.
don't know.
Yeah, I've heard him playing at the mall and
Okay.
Target, and
So now it's music.
yeah,
Got it.
yes,
Okay, so what we have is our DJ/DJ reading lyrics from different albums over other songs in the quote, mingling it with non sequiturs concerning ozone alerts, temperature inversions, the health of her cat, named Jenny, which is apparently where we get the name Jenny, and what would seem to have been album notes in a never identified foreign language she pronounced as though it were English. I really liked that line because there's a musical artist whose name I do not know, who's French,
okay,
who has done albums of English sounding songs. So the words are not in French or in English, but it's what English sounds like to someone who's never learned English. And it teeters on the brink of comprehensibility, but doesn't quite tip over into anything. It sounds like English, but you can't quite hear it just right or something. Yeah. Anyway, so that's what that made me think of.
So we end up with her getting stuck.
Right. She tips over the albums and they block the door.
Yeah.
Which again, we're in a physical world here, not a digital world.
Yeah. And one of them slid under the door. She's trapped in. And so she was stuck in there for 18 minutes before people could come get her out.
Yes. And then everyone calls the station.
Yeah. Because this is all real time.
Right?
And
yes.
So they know what's going on.
Yeah.
So you've had this very weird, surreal experience where it's like ozone alerts over some jazz music or whatever.
And my cat's health.
Yeah. And then you hear a crash, and then there's...
Right.
Yeah. So this, I guess one thing here, we have our little Wolfe inside a Wolfe story.
Oh, you underlined that too?
Yeah.
That she was replaced by an organ recital taped at Wolfe Trap?
Yeah.
Can't imagine what that means.
Now, Wolfe Trap National Park for the Performing Arts. It's in Virginia. So named because there used to be a large number of wolf packs that lived in the area historically.
Interesting. And particularly chosen because, I don't know, our author here might be in the story somewhere.
She gained some notoriety because of this. She has a show where she's referred to as a media celebrity. On September 1st, the show goes into nationwide syndication.
Yes.
On November 12th, she's married.
Yeah, she gets married. And the marriage lasts 2 days.
Yep. So in December, she gets the request for transcribing her broadcast into a book. Then in February, punk band, and that it's Digital Deros?
Deros, yeah.
The only reason I bring that one up, so there's two possibilities here, and knowing Wolfe, he probably smiled at the overlap, but one is the date estimated return from overseas.
Okay.
Well, it's military slang, and it also tour of duty is what it is. I'm not sure when that became popular.
Okay.
The other one is it's a British and Australian slang for vagrants. So it's either they're digital army men, digital soldiers, digital vagrants.
Or digital vagrants. That's interesting.
And I think both would work for the punk aesthetic.
Yes. And as a connection that Wolfe would think was interesting.
Yeah. And so as a result of that, they send an advance copy to the radio station where she's working.
Right. And this is an album that is punk music based on the book that is the transcription of her narration over the top of albums.
Yes.
Okay.
I feel like this is something really new and out there for Wolfe.
What?
Yeah.
Little worm Ouroboros eating its own tail. Yes.
So March 1st, Spinning Jenny played the record, hearing her words in the mouths of others for the first time, and simultaneously reading from the album notes, which quoted the lyrics at some length. It has been conjectured that she suffered a form of verbal overload, but this cannot be confirmed. She has refused psychiatric help.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we get a positive feedback loop in the sense of it keeps building on itself and her brain fritzes out.
Yes. So we have March 1st. We're in 1982 now.
Yes, so it's the end of the year 81, she gets married, etc. And then in December of 81, she's compiling the book. And then in February of 82, it's getting turned into a punk album. And then March 1st, she fries her brain with her own words.
Yeah, and this is where we get, so at March, and then if we go back to the second paragraph, it's in June, so 3 months later, when she's still mute, is when she was filling in.
As the temporary news reporter.
Yeah.
For whom there were no complaints.
Yeah. So she's silent.
Which, why would we complain?
I guess.
Well, I don't want to hear the news.
Yeah.
Okay, so I thought that date was a typo.
So did I.
Okay. But do you have evidence to believe that it was deliberate? Or do you just, I mean, if it was deliberate, he's being amusing, saying this is a silent reporter. If he made a mistake with the year, it also works because the universe is a cohesive whole, and even if you make a mistake, it works.
My evidence is many-fold in the sense that it's intuition.
So you've read Wolfe before?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if this is a misprint, it's a typo that showed up in both editions.
That is good verification.
Yeah. And it seems to be too in line with Wolfe's style, where early on things that you are confused about often get thrown in a different light if you go back and reread after you finished reading it the first time.
Right. So there's this really interesting picture of a knight with a gold visor and in an interesting landscape. And then, oh, that's what that was.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, I mean, I think it fits. It's just the first time I read it, or maybe the second time I read it, I was just like, okay, 80, 81, 82, I think this wires got crossed here.
Yeah, I assumed it was a typo until I tried to timeline it. And then I was like, oh.
Now it makes sense.
Yeah. So we end with her not being able to use a conventional typewriter, and instead she's using a daisy wheel printer.
Yeah, a word processor and a daisy wheel printer.
Yeah, so conventional typewriter, it's got the type bar, kind of in usually a half moon shape, and if it's a manual, you have to hit the keys really hard.
Yes.
If it's electronic, you can be lazy, and it'll hit the key harder for you.
I think about 80% of the reason that I'm a decently fast typist today is that I first learned on a manual typewriter, and so when you no longer have to put that energy into pressing the keys, you can move your fingers a lot faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she can't use a conventional typewriter. It is inadequate for her needs. And she has stated, parenthetically, in a note, that her book will be completed, quote, soon. She wouldn't be the first author to do this to us, and she certainly was not the last.
Yeah. So there's where we end with Spinning Jenny.
Yeah, and she's a character in search of a book, right? That's the concept of Bibliomen. What kind of book do you think she would end up in?
I think the book that she's trying to end up in is an autobiography that is gathering up all these nonsensical, random aspects of her life, and she's trying to put a authorial framework over it.
So, like many of us, she's trying to make meaning of her life, and she keeps circling around the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And I think that works for the theme there because she's a character in search of a book, but then if she's writing an autobiography, she's going to be a character in her own book.
Right. And her life is now characterized by her inability to distinguish the correct words, and then her reliance on her own words, and that reliance bringing her to total confusion. I feel like this is therapeutically important.
Yeah. So stepping back a little bit,
okay.
Going back to something I said at the beginning, I think where you said you bounced off this, I think that in one sense we're getting maybe on a meta level a critique of Stein.
Yeah, so I don't feel like I have, well, I know, and I've already admitted that I don't have the context to identify that. What did you come up with in, like, your research about Stein's reception, or?
Well, I have a running list of authors that Wolfe has spoken of, either ones that he liked or ones that he felt greatly influenced him. And I've never seen Gertrude Stein on that list.
Right, no reference to her.
Yeah. And one thing, Wolfe tended to be a little more discreet when he didn't like.
Yeah, he's pretty reserved, at least in the interviews I've read, about commenting on something that he did not like. He'd rather just not talk about it, it seems.
So
Perhaps in private he was more open, but...
Maybe. Like one of the strongest negative things I've seen him say, A.J. Cronin.
Yeah.
Okay, so he made a dismissive comment about his works in one of his interviews. But that was one of the strongest.
And in kind of an outlier.
Yeah. So I'm once again, I'm just extrapolating here because if this is Gertrude Stein, he never said anything positive about her. And she does have a reputation for kind of being a, like, throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks type of writer. And maybe I'm completely wrong.
You might be, but we don't have Jean here to tell you, so.
Yeah. All right. Do you have anything else? Do you want to talk anymore about Spinning Jenny?
I don't think I do. I think I'm a little more reconciled to it, as is always, at least so far, the case with a Wolfe work. Talking about it deepens your understanding. Having these conversations makes it more enjoyable, partly for the reason that you just get to enjoy it more because you're conversing about it or you're unpacking it. But I definitely understand more about it than I did the first time I read it, going back through it. So I think I'm a little bit more reconciled to it, even though she's not my favorite one of the characters from Bibliomen. At least, yeah. And I'm pretty sure she's going to stay off of the favorite characters list. I'm a little bit more enthusiastic about this next guy.
Are you?
Yeah, Bernard A. French.
What makes you enthusiastic about this guy?
Well, I just really like this little vignette, so I'll summarize this one. We have a guy who was born in 1959, gets his MFA, and in 1980, which that year seems to be, well, the 80s seem to be important for this collection. Can't imagine why. Maybe just set in time. And he becomes an editor, and then he decides he's going to publish the largest coffee table art book ever seen. And so then we get a description of what it is, and then it's an initial print run of 50,000 copies, which is quite a large print run for a coffee table book.
Okay, that's what I thought, but that's
yeah, it's quite a large print run for anything that's not already coming from a confirmed best-selling author, especially in the 80s. And then the books are delivered. There's a mysterious loud noise coming from French's office after the books have been delivered. Although I didn't do the calculations on this, depending on how thick these books are, 50,000 of these coffee table books, which are described as being 6 feet by 9 feet, would probably fill an office pretty well.
Well, I thought they just delivered the initial copy. I assumed the rest of them were in a warehouse.
Oh, yeah. The initial copy of the 50,000 copy print run. That makes sense. Okay, and then the books are delivered. There's a loud noise. It seems that French has gone to lunch and is not there. Then he never shows up at the office again. And eventually, in 1986, so a bored custodian is looking through that coffee table book and finds Bernard French pressed between the pages. And then he's finally interred after he had died, and he's finally buried in the book as his coffin. So, and then his epitaph is Bernard A. French, a page at the court of God. So there's a lot for me to love here.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy this one?
I did. It's one of the things I was thinking about. Is coffee table books even a thing anymore? Like, I don't see them as often.
Well, if you go to the discount section at Barnes & Noble, there's always something floating around there. But no, I don't think coffee table books are nearly as much of a thing anymore.
Okay. So, because this whole joke about him making the largest one, and they call it the dinosaur folio.
Yes.
Like, I remember there was a time period there where it seemed like, oh, look, an Ansel Adams book. And then
right.
It's like, as a child, you're like, this book is as big as me. And it seemed like for a while there, they were getting ridiculously large, to the point that I remember going over to one of my mom's friend's house, and she had a coffee table book on the coffee table. And it was almost the size of the surface of the coffee table.
I think that's hilarious. There was a Seinfeld episode. I would have no idea when or it originally aired. I think I just saw it as a rerun when I was in college. And one of the characters, the spastic one, Kramer. He gets in, I think he's the one that gets into wanting to publish a coffee table book about coffee tables that is itself a coffee table. I'm pretty sure I'm remembering this correctly. I actually didn't look this up, which makes me a bad podcaster. Brent will be angry with me later for not verifying this detail. But, and so the coffee table book has little fold out legs, so it makes a little coffee table. It's a normal size coffee table book.
Okay.
It's not monstrous, but that's what I thought of when I first read this, that the coffee table book that is itself a coffee table.
One of the things that I was thinking about getting vibes of is there's almost like a reversal of French and Severian.
Tell me more.
Well, because Severian looks in the giant book that the autarch has, and it almost kills him, but it's opening to a larger reality. And then with French, he makes this giant book, and when he goes into it, he gets smashed between them.
Right.
So I was just thinking about giant novelty books that these are probably the only two that are in Wolfe's work.
Well, I had a different take on how this relates to the solar cycle, although I did also relate it to the solar cycle, which is just that we read it, we get lost in the book, haha, get it? And then, so there's a sense where we are preserved in the text as we interpret it, but also there's the comment that he had discolored the paper where he was pressed in the book. We stain the pages, we leave our mark, interpretively or not. And so that was where I went with that this is something of an extended metaphor about the reception of large and difficult work.
Yes, even more weighty given the fact that we're recording our thoughts on...
I know, right?
Yeah.
I also just like I just enjoy the whole idea of a novelty book and the production of it. The biggest, the best, or the smallest, or the prettiest, or the most extreme example of a thing is, I think that exists in many worlds, but it definitely exists in the book world. The actual largest published book in the world is one that was printed in Brazil in 2007. And it measured 6 feet 7 inches by 10 feet 1 inch. So close to the size that Wolfe proposes here. But that wasn't until the 2000s. And so well after Bernard A. French was preserved in his dinosaur folio.
Did you order a copy of that?
I did not.
Okay.
I don't know if you know this, but I don't have any room for books anymore. I keep all of the shelves are full.
Lies, listeners. Nothing but lies. She's going to go buy more books.
Okay, listeners, in all honesty, a month ago, I got 30 new feet of bookshelves. Not like 30 feet of a single shelf, but 30 feet of 6-shelf high bookshelves. And I think that there is there's one 3-foot section.
3 inches of space up there.
There's 5 inches right there, but that's just because I decided to sell a couple of books next time I take a trip to Powell's.
Yeah, and I see 3 other gaps, each one of them less than 6 inches of space from where I'm sitting, so...
Would anyone like to know how many boxes are sitting in this room that have not been unpacked because there is not shelf space? And this is just one of the 2 libraries that have full shelves. So, no, I did not order this 6.5 by 10-foot book. I have no place to put it. Maybe I don't need a bed. I find
it odd that somebody so book obsessed would be fascinated with Bernard French's. Like, I wonder why that resonated with you.
Can't imagine. All right, so I also found the largest manuscript ever made.
Oh.
It's called the Devil's Manuscript, or the Codex Gigas, or Gigas. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. And it is only 36 by 20 inches, which is not that large. In fact, I have a manuscript page that's nearly that large, but it's a complete manuscript of the Vulgate.
Okay.
With the works of Josephus and a number of other texts included with it. So it's on 320 vellum sheets. They believe that it's calf, although reportedly it might also be donkey, which is hilarious. Donkey vellum is not a usual choice.
Okay, I was going to say I haven't heard that as much.
Well, so there are a lot of legends about it. So it's called the Devil's Manuscript because it has a very large full-page illustration of the devil on one of the pages. And so there are 2 opposed illustrations. One's the heavenly city and one's an illustration of the devil. But it's very striking, and it is a full-page picture of the devil. But the manuscript itself is written in an incredibly even hand. And given that it's such a large book, it's surprising that it would have what looks to be the exact same handwriting from beginning to end. Because if you do research in manuscripts, you find that even though their handwriting is so much better than anyone alive today, and so much more consistent that to us it very often looks like printing, there is typically a slight variation from the beginning of the day's writing and the end of the day's writing. And there's also a very dramatic difference between the beginning of a manuscript and the end of a manuscript. And you can also analyze when each signature was composed in order by the decrease or the disruption of the handwriting style, especially with a large production, which if it was a single scribe doing it, you would end up with as age and their eyesight fails, their handwriting tends to be much worse. Although, again, still so much better than my handwriting toward the end of their career as a scribe.
Yeah.
And of course, typically with a very large manuscript, you have a number of scribes working on it. So you have everyone using the same, what we would call font, but the same script. But there are just slight variations in each scribe's expression of it. And so you can identify different scribes. So the Devil's Manuscript, one style of handwriting beginning to end, doesn't seem to change at any point in the manuscript. And it probably would have taken about 20 years of writing, given the rate of production of a scribe, to write out. And so one of the legends associated with it, and part of why it has that identity as the Devil's Manuscript, is that the scribe sold his soul to the devil in order to be able to complete the manuscript in one night. Anyway, so those couple of large books, they're not the dinosaur folio, but that was the rabbit hole I went down.
Very interesting. I enjoyed the French one. It's shorter. I didn't have a lot of other things on it. Or anything else that you would?
Well, okay, I'm just a book nerd, but dinosaur folio is a fun coinage.
Yeah.
Because I think probably most bookish people know that there are different sizes of books based on sort of a rough approximation of the size of vellum sheets and then later the size of printed paper and how it would be folded and then cut for different page sizes. So your standard book is a quarto or an octavo, typically, which would be 4 folds or 8 folds. And then a folio is just one large sheet folded in half. And so you do occasionally encounter, if you're looking at books and they're described like on a site like Abe Books or something, you'll see elephant folio. And that's a given bibliophile term, the elephant folio, which is larger than a standard folio. But then Wolfe invented the dinosaur folio. So, yeah, that was the only other detail that I thought about. I don't know if I'm missing interpretive depth or over-reading this getting lost in a book kind of thing, but if I had to go, I think that's probably how I'd go.
Yeah, and there's enough tonnage of books surrounding us that
it could happen.
Yeah, you'd go quick.
Well, I've always figured I'm going to die, not folded into a particular book, but there's going to be a bookshelf. Hopefully not till I'm in my 80s, but if I don't die from a bookshelf falling over me, when I do die, just pull a bookshelf over on me because that's how I'm supposed to go.
I would be remiss if I did not point out the dad joke here at the end.
Wait, there's a dad joke?
Yeah, a page at the court of God.
Yeah.
It's Page on the page.
Yes.
It's printed as page, but homophone there with a servant in the court.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I liked that too.
Well, if you don't have anything else, I think I've said everything about these 2 sections.
Well, I'm just excited for our next episode when we get to meet Mary Beatrice Smoot-Friarly.
Yeah, the next one is long enough to be kind of its own short story. And so we're going to dedicate an entire episode to it.
Okay, until next time. The Unreliable Narrators are Amanda Patchen and Brent Towell. And, as Gene Wolfe said, imagine a man who stands before a mirror. A stone strikes it, and it falls to ruin all in an instant. And the man learns that he is himself, and not the mirrored man he believed himself to be.